we're now joined by commercial farmer in KwaZulu-Natal and Agribusiness Consultant Sanele Mbili. Thanks so much indeed for joining us and welcome to the program.
Good evening, Peter, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, from all the visuals and the stories that are coming out of KwaZulu-Natal, these rains and the concomitant flooding has caused havoc in the province. Can you give us an update on how this has affected farmers in the province and to what extent?
Thank you, Peter. Farmers currently in KZN are experiencing quite a lot of challenges. You'll recall that last year, around April, we also did receive almost the same rainfalls, like flooding. So in fact, the infrastructure hasn't been fixed from last year. So that's the biggest challenge, because we've been preaching this thing of the infrastructure going to the farms, that the government should look into it. But now the floodings, 2 times in a row, it's becoming a challenge. And also with the farmers, they've been having a lot of challenges with the input costs rising up last year, and also the issue of the load shedding as well. It's massively affecting the farmers as well. So it's really difficult for the farmers right now in KZN.
Which parts of the province are most badly affected?
Yeah, this flooding has happened in the past 3 weeks. They mostly happened in the northern parts, like Pongola, Newcastle, and also some south coast a bit towards the Eastern Cape. So most of the farmers, all their crops, are flooded. They are unable to do the harvesting. Now that's a problem, especially in terms of the markets, because the market is waiting for the products, but now the farmers are unable to transport the products to the market. So it's also a bit affecting the food security of the country as well.
Where are we in terms of saving the crops, if that's possible?
It's really difficult, because we're actually experiencing what we call a La Nina. I think for the past 4 years, we've been receiving more than normal rainfalls, So I think the farmers, they really need to ensure that they put their good agricultural practices in order to make sure that they don't really lose much of their crops as well, just making sure that they have waterways, all their soil is always covered, and so on. But in terms of government as well, I think it's really sad that the damage that happened last year, it's still there, in most of the areas, in access road to the farms. That damage is still there, it's not fixed. And you'll remember that last year they did declare states of national disaster, but still nothing really happens most of the farms. And again, this year, same thing will happen. They've also declared, I think 5 days ago, they've also said that it's a state of the nation disaster as well. So we're hoping maybe this year they will do something in terms of the infrastructure, because I think this is the most important thing for the farmer right now.
What relief has been forthcoming so far from the authorities? What have they promised?
Well, I like the word you are using. What have they promised? Because most of the time you'll hear it on the news, but really the farmer really doesn't really receive those funds. Sometimes you hear that the funds are going back to the government because they were never utilized. Same thing happened with the looting and with the floods as well last year. So especially with the small-scale farmers, I think the government really needs to look at how they channel these funds, and also how they make sure or ensure that the small-scale farmer and the black farmers really do benefit from these funding or programs that they have.
What have the authorities been telling you why the infrastructure issues that seem to be an annual problem have not been and are not being addressed?
Well, really, there's no tangible information in terms of that. We don't really know what's happening. As I was saying, even before last year, the floods of last year, we've been preaching this thing of saying, please, they should fix the infrastructure, especially at the farms, so that, the consumers can be able to go and buy or pick up their products directly from the farmer. But it seems that is going very slow in terms of on the government side.
So what happens to the farmers now? I mean, it looks as if you're helpless at this stage. Multiple year failures because of flooding and infrastructure damage must mean that at some point that's the end.
Exactly. In fact, I was just talking to one farmer last week who was doing poultry, and they had to shut down, because of the flooding, and they're also suffering from the load shedding as well. So those people were producing like 3,000 chickens, per cycle. So now that farm had to shut down because really there was nothing else they could do. They couldn't afford, the generators. They couldn't afford to start and fix and buy new inputs so that they can start all over again. So it's really a big challenge here in KZN, and I really hope the government will really put time and look into this.
Are there many, many more farms that are on the brink as we speak?
Yeah, especially in the north of KZN. North of KZN, most of the farmers we communicate with mostly they have livestock, they have macadamia nuts, and as well as in the south coast as well. I think those are the farmers that really need assistance in terms of the infrastructure, mostly the bridges and the roads, towards the farms. So you'll remember that there was also a Transnet strike as well, so they couldn't take their products for exports as well. So it's another challenge as well now because they won't be able to take their products to the exports as well. So it's really not looking good for the farmers right now.
All right. I think you might have answered my next question a little bit before, but this is something that's likely to happen again next year, given the climate changes that we're experiencing. Lessons learned from the past, is there anything that farmers can do to prepare for the next rains and floods, just to mitigate some of the damage, if we work on the basis that you're on your own?
Yeah, they've indicated that, for the past 4 years, it was La Nina, so meaning that we've been receiving more than normal rainfall, but from this year, later this year, we'll start receiving less. In fact, we'll be experiencing the droughts from later this year, so this upcoming summer season will be, very little rainfall, and going forward, I think what's important for the farmers now is to develop some structures or practices that can assist them in saving water or in harvesting water, because droughts are coming in the next year. So that's what they need to look into.
Sanele Mbili, thank you so much indeed for joining us. Your insights greatly appreciated, and we wish you and your fellow farmers the best in KwaZulu-Natal.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right, that's Sanele Mbili, who's a commercial farmer himself and an agribusiness consultant, saying he's very concerned about the lack of help that he's and his fellow farmers have received from government, particularly in terms of dealing with infrastructure damage that's affecting the farmers. And that coupled with load shedding, well, we're seeing farms shutting down.